everybody. This is Pastor George from Between Meals Video Podcast, and I am coming to you today because I, a couple of weeks ago, sat down with a friend of mine, Denise Rivers, who is a longtime professional counselor in this area. She's been dealing with mental health in the church and the school system for a long time, and so I decided to sit down with her and talk about a biblical perspective on mental health. And it was a fantastic time, this is the full conversation. We edited out a little bit because she was talking to me, and I can be a little crazy sometimes. And so the conversation was fantastic. We talked about addiction. We talked about medication. We talked about therapy and questions you should ask your therapist, things you should do before going to see a therapist. We just went through all kinds of different topics. It was a really, really great conversation. I hope this becomes a good resource for you. Feel free to share it. It's much longer than a normal podcast that I would put out would be. It's a little over 2 hours long, so feel free to take this in small bites. But I encourage you to listen, to consider, and to think about who in your life, other than just yourself, can benefit from this. Because as I learned during this, we all have mental health, but not all of us suffer from mental illness. And there's a difference. And mental health is something you maintain, just like your physical health. And illness is something we deal with because we're not maintaining our mental health. So it's a really important topic that I think we as Christians need to be dealing with, especially going into the times that we're dealing with now and the amount of pressure that can be on us from all sides. So I hope this becomes a good resource for you. Feel free to share. And yeah, there you go. Bye-bye.
Yes.
Greetings, everyone, and my name is George Gray. Welcome to Between Meals Bible Studies. I'm here with my friend Denise Rivers, who helps identify crazy people. And we're going to be talking about a Christian perspective on mental health today. And we've got all the necessary things here. We've got coffee, we've got microphones, we have peanut butter M&Ms. And now we're just going to trust that God's going to lead us in this in some way, shape, or form without us getting or becoming heretics. So anyway, so we're going to start with just some basic understandings because people are unfamiliar with this topic. And I originally wanted to talk to you about this because it is such a pervasive topic within the church that I think it gets pushed off to the background as like it's something that's not very important. So let's start off with the really obvious one. What is mental health?
Well, I think people get mental health and mental illness confused, and then that becomes scary. Mental health we all have. It's a condition. It's a psychological well-being. Mental illness, on the other hand, is when illness takes place. Mental illness such as depression, anxiety, or anything that goes beyond that may be even more severe. But everybody has mental health.
What are some of the things that we should do as Christians in relationship to our mental health and how we view things that are going on around us?
Well, I think as Christians, we're left with thinking. I'm going to go off a little bit first,
absolutely,
because I think that we think that if we just have God in our lives, that's going to be enough. That's going to be enough to keep us sane or mentally sane. But then we forget that we are a fallen being and we're humans. Mm-hmm. That's not going to be something that's going to consistently be happening throughout our lives as far as the sanity, 100% sanity. Yeah. I think we have to acknowledge that we're still human.
Yep.
And that we often aren't going to be able to just pray our way out of it. And I think that becomes a scary thing for many Christians.
Yeah.
Because prayer is a part of our lives. God expects us to move. There is some sort of movement on our part that we have to do. Prayer is absolutely vital in our lives. Mm-hmm. But if we don't do something in return, what do we expect? Mm-hmm. Well, nothing's going to change. And then what is the definition of insanity? Mm-hmm. Is doing the same thing over and over and expecting something to change. We have to do something.
So wait a minute. If I keep doing the same thing over and over again and I'm constantly getting the same result, you mean the problem is me?
Basically.
Crap.
That's like, that would be prescribing the symptom. Okay, George, just continue to do what you're doing because you're really great at that. You can't figure out why this continues to hurt. Or why am I still in this boat that I've been in for months on end, if not years on end? Well, just keep doing what you're doing. Keep doing it.
So that sounds like you're saying that we should take responsibility for our own mental health and that we shouldn't just throw it up on somebody else. That I mean, obviously, I think all of my mental illness problems are everybody else's fault.
Well, sure.
Sure. And I should never actually take personal responsibility for those because I can clearly blame them on somebody else. I mean, I've learned this from politicians my whole life.
Well, and again, if we want to look at the state that we're in right now, it's so much easier to lay blame. It's so much easier to play victim. And that's really where we are as not just as watching politicians, but culturally. We've worked our way right to that point where it's so much easier to be the victim and to blame it on somebody else and not take personal responsibility.
Yep.
That's really hard because then that means we have to change. And that also means, I think before that change happens, that I have to really know who I am. I have to find out what's really going on. I have to admit, whoa, there's something wrong.
Yeah.
That has to change.
Yeah, that's the same way we have to come to Christ. When we come to Christ, if we come to Christ trying to repent of everybody else's sin or, explaining to God that I sinned because of all these horrible, terrible things that people have done to me, then there's no real repentance in me. And I can't actually expect to be helped in any way, shape, or form. Nothing in my life will change because I'm not willing to admit it.
Right.
That's...
Well, and looking at that as far as the Christian perspective on a lot of the stigma that really lies with us not wanting to reach out for help, because again we look at it as if we should just be praying and God should be taking care of all of this, and then again reflecting back on if we're not doing that personal responsibility, or even worse, I think a lot of Christians and myself included sometimes, whoa, it's a character flaw. Or, well, it's chemistry. It's this either or thinking, which we can get ourselves in big trouble. There's more to it than just that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Way more to it.
Yeah. So how should Christians approach their personal mental well-being?
Well, I think like with anything else, intentionally. I think if we're not intentional about trying to understand what's going on with us and not be afraid to step forward and ask somebody for some help. Because again, if we actually think that God is going to look upon us poorly because we reached out for help, well, then we're really not biblical. That's not biblical. We need people. We need people desperately. We need people now more than ever.
Yeah.
Now that we've been, forced to stay away from each other and forced to not be around like-minded individuals, Christian individuals, or for that matter, anybody. Yeah. We really have to step back and take a look at, where are we right now? How am I feeling? And I think depression and anxiety, to me, it's peanut butter and jelly. You can't have one without the other sometimes with anxiety and depression. And with what's happening with our society now, people are feeling those intense feelings of sadness, the anhedonia, which is the loss of pleasure. Just feeling that.
Anhedonia?
Yes.
That's a condition.
Well, it is nothing more than a loss of feeling pleasure. And if that starts to decrease, and you're starting to feel sadness, you're starting to see, whether it's an increase or decrease in sleep, food. I'm not eating as much as I should, or I'm eating way too much. There's a lot of things that we have to pay attention to, and yes, there's one of them right there. But be intentional about it. And pay attention. God gave us this awesome body, and most of the time, we don't pay attention to it when it tells us. When we're feeling pain, when we're feeling fear, when any of that, we set it aside and just try to plow through it, you know.
So when I'm feeling uncomfortable, what you're saying is like Little Debbie's and ice cream. I mean, I think Little Debbie is actually a nurse, I think, because she just makes me happy. It's like, it's like little puffy morphine. Okay, maybe that's not quite accurate, but so you're saying feeding your depression is probably a bad idea.
It's not a good idea. It's not a good idea. You know, and you had mentioned in one of your sermons about food, and actually, no, it wasn't you. I'm sorry. It was Dan Mosier.
Yes.
He did mention, how we shouldn't love food. Well, we shouldn't, but we do.
I wasn't listening to that part.
Oh, no, you missed that part. But we do. We have some of us have a very strange and sick love affair with food, and that can go with any other addiction. Doesn't necessarily. It's not just food.
Yeah, I know. When I was in the restaurant industry, it was to be successful. Food had to be your life. Yeah. Constantly tasting this and that, and when I left that, and got full time into ministry, it was like losing an old girlfriend. It's like, but this was such a fun part of my life. Now it's gone. Now it's gone, and and I can't just go to restaurant after restaurant and order food. Now if I want it, I have to make it, and that's just boring.
It's too much work.
Yeah,
way too much work. Well, and it's we have to have food to survive, obviously, but it's balance. It's balance in everything, not just the food part, but everything in our life. Yeah. And if we fall off balance, we know it. Now, whether we really actually pay attention to it or not is up to the individual, but we should be paying attention when we're off balance.
Yeah,
it doesn't always happen. But
that's awesome. So what are some of the mistakes that you see happening within the church, just the church in general? I mean, you've been counseling for a long time. Well, let's start here. What do you see as things that have happened over the last year with COVID and the lockdowns, especially among the church population, the people that you work with, even the students and stuff that you work with? What do you see happening?
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is the isolation part of it. And we're not designed, God didn't design us to be alone. And once we experience being alone way too much, I think that can take on a whole new life of its own. We start getting into our heads way too much and spending way too much time in our own heads. And then we get stuck in it. And then it's the cyclical...
But I love my opinion because I always agree with it.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and that's great. But then when we have to go out and be with other people, it's not so great anymore. I think the main thing that I've seen is the isolation, which will also bring on depression. And again, I always see, with some depression, anxiety is attached to it as well. So there's that huge amount of depression, the anxiety, the lack of socialization. And I see that with students, but also see it with older folks too. If we're left to our own accord for too long, it's easy to spin out of control.
Yeah. So when we're talking about people in the church, I've heard this for years that a real Christian won't deal with fear. A real Christian won't deal with depression, because how could you have depression if you're serving a great loving God? He would never allow his people to deal with depression. And it's always driven me completely crazy, because God is not just sitting up in heaven trying to decide what our next step is going to be. There's a role that we play in our life and in our choices, and our choices have consequences, and those consequences have consequences, and it leads one to another. But this mythology, how do you approach this mythology of a real Christian won't struggle in this area? And some people have actually taken to the place where if you do struggle in this area, maybe you're not a real Christian. Of course, that's really loving.
Oh,
you
sure.
know? Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, again, is any of what you just said really biblically based? If we just go right back to the beginning, and we are a fallen being, so we're not immune to any of that. God gave us free will. We still have choice. Now, albeit He gives us the out. We always have an out. We always have, I can do this or I can do that. But that doesn't excuse us from not having that choice. We still do, Christian or not Christian. We still have that free will. So to look at that and say, well, I should be able to get through this. And I shouldn't have to experience any of that because, our God is a good God. He's a great guy. Well, let's go back to that magical thinking. Yes, He is. He's a wonderful God. But once again, He has also given us free will. And we have choices. Yeah. And those the volitional choices or causes, that's most of what I see. And those are the ramifications of our choice. When someone comes to me and says, this is going on with me, most of the time it's caused by something that we've chosen.
Back to that whole personal responsibility thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, Scripture tells us that no temptation has overtaken us except that which is common to man. I was actually just looking for it. I can't remember exactly where it is off the top of my head because I'm only a pastor and I probably should. But, that's just what happens at the last minute. But I've always looked at those things just as that. When people say, well, there's no real free will in Christianity, and I think it's all free will.
Oh, yeah.
And you can't have truth like that without choice being smack dab in the middle of everything. And no matter what we're doing, when I see that, so I've had these conversations where I'll talk to people about that particular verse, no temptation is taken you except that which is common to man. But God will always allow you to, will make a way for you to stand up underneath it.
Right.
And people take that and they say, well, you see, so if I'm following God, I won't have to deal with this because God's made a way for me to stand up for it. But they forget that you have to make the choice to take the way that God has given you to stand up underneath it. And sometimes you have to stand up underneath it and bear the pain of it, at the same time. But especially in modern day Christianity, progressive Christianity, we don't want pain.
Oh, no.
We don't want to have to make difficult choices that might divide us.
Yeah.
I've heard this said today. I'd rather divide over truth than unify in a lie. Yeah. And it's amazing how that works.
It is, and it's frightening to think that we have now been conditioned to believe and literally trained through the years to believe that we shouldn't have pain. And I mean, it's culturally, you see it everywhere, from the commercials on television, just in our own speak. Oh, I'm so sorry you're going through that pain. You shouldn't be feeling what you're feeling.
Yes.
Well, yes, we should. There's a reason why we have pain. There's a reason for all of that. It would be like, constantly touching fire. And, ouch. We need to have that there. We need to have the ability to feel that so we know that there's something that has to be changed. Okay, don't touch it anymore.
Yep.
Don't do that anymore.
When we were getting ready for this, we were talking about, you're talking about pain being that signaling device that we tend to want to ignore, but it's actually there for a legitimate reason.
For a reason.
Yeah, talk about that for a minute.
Yeah. If it wasn't there, if we didn't have the pain in our lives that God has basically given us, then imagine, well, first of all right, imagine what it would be like not to have pain. Imagine
not to be able to feel physical
pain. Not
pain.
to feel physical pain.
I'd bleed a lot.
Yes. You'd be tore up, George.
Yeah.
Tore up.
Yeah.
We'd all be tore up.
Yeah.
We'd be battered. We'd lose limbs. We'd lose digits. It would be.
Oh, that was weird. Yeah.
It would be a mess. We need to have that. The physical and the mental, I tie together. Mental pain we also need to have. How are we going to grow as individuals if we don't experience that mental pain? And again, it's there for a reason. It's to tell us something's wrong. If I feel, an emotion of sadness, it's there for a reason. Something happened. Something occurred in my life for that to happen. happen. Same with any other emotion. If we dismiss those emotions, we have to have it. We have to have pain. Anxiety is the same thing. That's normal. Anxiety is normal. And I have people coming to me, oh my goodness, I'm so anxious. Okay, first of all, it lies on a scale of severity. Second of all, anxiety is a normal thing. You should have anxiety because here's a cliff, and if you get too close to that cliff, you should be feeling whoa, or else you're just gonna dive right off.
Yep. Yeah. Yep.
We need it.
Talking to Christians about anxiety, and it's one of those things where it gets so beaten up. And I've had this. I had a couple scriptures written down. I had this thrown at me a couple times. Be anxious for nothing, but in everything, in prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. Philippians 4, verse 6. That and then you got to finish off with, and when you do that, when you can just not be anxious
Ever.
then the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus. So the basic idea behind that is as a Christian, I should have so much control over my own psychology, my own surroundings, that there's nothing that anyone does around me that could ever cause me to be anxious enough. And
Sounds like heaven, George.
Oh,
Sounds
yeah.
like heaven.
Yeah, and by allowing people and their attitudes to rob me of my peace.
Right. Okay.
See, that's why I have anxiety, because I have allowed other people to rob me of the peace of God.
Right.
And I don't. So, from a psychologist standpoint, how would you approach something like that?
That's like super interesting, because then we really have to take a look at what we can control and what we can't control. And the way you're describing it is you're basically describing that there is a puppet master, and that puppet master is in total control of me. And that's not true. We know that.
Yep.
So we have to differentiate what we can control and what we can't control. I can't control you. I can't control your reactions. Now, I may be able to, just affect you a little bit. But for the most part, if we can get a grip on what you can control and what you can't control, I can only control myself. I can control my reactions. I can control my actions. If you do that when you're around any human being, you may be able to see some difference in the other person. You're not controlling them. You're influencing, but you're not controlling.
Yeah.
So it's getting a handle on which you can control and which you can't control. And 9 times out of 10, that's usually when I'm sitting down with somebody, and I'm sure you probably experience the same thing. Somebody comes in for counsel, and they are looking at you to fix the other person that's not even in the room.
Yep.
No, that's not what therapy is.
Yep. Or can you fix my wife?
Yeah, no.
No, because I never recommend divorce. But you're pushing me. Yeah. And that's actually exactly what this verse is talking about. It's not allowing anxiety to come over you. It's just understanding that you have control over that moment.
You do.
And just be okay with where you are. Don't be seeking out some sort of mythological joy that doesn't actually exist. But just find peace where you are. Boy, people hate that.
They do. And again, I think that just goes back to the personal responsibility. It's easy for us to blame. It's much easier for us to have that.
It's not more fun to blame other people.
Yeah.
Taking personal responsibility rots.
Not fun.
No.
It's not fun. No. But again, it's fairly simple.
Yeah.
But you know what? I say it's fairly simple. If it were that simple, I'd be out of a job.
True. Yeah, I imagine. Yeah. It's a lot like repentance. It's better when other people do it.
Yeah.
It's like, yikes. That's just awesome. Let me move over to another section of scripture.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of them in here. Here's a good one that everyone loves to quote, and I have seen more people struggling with this, ironically, with their mental health, with not wanting to see a counselor, not wanting to take their prescribed medication, and they fall back on Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, which is using that in the more common sense that I can accomplish anything to my mind is not only it's a horrible misuse of the scripture by itself, because that's not what Paul's talking about. He's not talking about accomplishing anything. He's about dealing with whatever gets thrown at you. So he can be poor, cold, naked, hungry. He can be all that stuff, and that's okay because he's not anxious for anything. Same section of scripture. But we use that and we twist it. And you see it twisted in the church all the time that, you know what? My psychologist is telling me that I have depression and they want to put me on this to help me get through it. But you know what? I'm not going to take it, even though I've attempted suicide 4 times, because I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. How are we supposed to deal with that?
I think they're
other than a small room and
padded room,
and a jacket with a lot of buckles.
Yeah, medication. That is a touchy subject for some. And again, because of the scripture that you just quoted, I think medication plays a big role in many individuals' lives as far as their mental health is concerned, and should play that role in their lives. Severe mental illness, most people with severe mental illness, and I'm just going to take 2 diagnoses just off the top of my head, thinking about a schizophrenia and bipolar disorder.
Yeah.
Historically, individuals that take those medications don't want to take those medications, and there's various reasons why they don't want to take them. But medication can be and is and should actually be in many individuals' lives. Let's take some of the lesser and look at the lesser mental illness and look at, should we or shouldn't we be taking these? And a number of questions I think you have to ask yourself if you're contemplating taking medications. Because as we just talked about a few minutes ago, should God be taking care of this? I should lie this all at God's feet. This should be all Him, and I never should go outside of that. Well, if we lived in heaven, perfect world, aside from the fallen man, that is all we need. We know that's not the case.
Yeah.
So when we're just starting to look at, all right, let's look at depression. Have you exhausted some of the certain things first before you even look at medication? Have you actually talked with somebody else? Have you actually applied some of those maybe new coping skills that other person has tried to tell you or tried to teach you? Have you applied some of the behavioral or cognitive tools that have been given to you? And if you have, how has it worked? Well, often you'll hear, well, it doesn't work.
Well, it's a scam. They just pharmaceuticals wanting to sell drugs.
Yeah. If we really pay attention to our mental health and how to approach it, medications can play a big part in it. But first and foremost, what I would like to see with most people is, have you changed the area of your struggle? If it's something that's beyond your control, like let's say, just because this is frequent, you have an individual in your life that we've already established, you can't control that. Have you learned the skills to be able to maneuver through that? It's your reality. This is what you live. It's not easy sometimes to get away from that. So have you looked at that, and is that something that you're willing, are you willing to look at it? And I'm not saying that individual, like a spouse or significant other, I'm not saying you have to leave that person, because oftentimes that's not going to be the case. And I'm not an advocate of divorcing or leaving. So if safety isn't an issue in that situation, what have you done? What have you done? Okay. All right. So you've come to the conclusion that, you know what, I've tried everything. Went in to see a counselor. We've talked about, all the new skills I can learn, some of the cognitive things that I can do, the thought processes, thoughts, the distortive thinking that I have. None of it's worked to the point where I want it to work.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Are we going to go for medication then? All right. But we also have to remember, medication is not a cure.
Yeah.
At its best, it's going to alleviate some of your symptoms. Yep. At its best.
Yeah, it's more of a management tool.
That's it.
Yep.
And then you're going to have to look at side effects.
Yep.
Because anything you put into your body that doesn't belong in your body is going to have a side effect.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying sometimes the cure can be worse than the disease. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I had quite a few people ask me, because talking about things like creation science, the fact that God created our bodies are created in His image. That there's people get the idea that there's some sort of heavenly perfection in our body, and if we're Christians, and God should maintain that level, and that whole old mentality that if you're sick, there's obviously sin in your life, which drives me insane when people go there. Yeah. But there is a very serious reality that we are still a biochemical machine, and there are environmental factors, social factors, all this stuff that plays in, and people don't realize that sometimes just being in a bad relationship, that pressure can change your brain chemistry.
Yes, it can.
And now you're altered into this state, and every now and then, I mean, if you think about an engine, sometimes you look at an engine and there's something leaking, and so you might not want to take it to the repair shop, so you change your environmental factors. Maybe you get underneath, you tighten something, you change the way you drive. You don't abuse the vehicle quite so much, but at some point you realize what you're doing can't fix the problem. So now you got to take it in and have it looked at, and have someone who knows a little bit more about these things understand, maybe there's a corrective prescription that needs to be taken.
And 9 times out of 10 there is.
Yeah.
There is. And we do have to look at many different causes. There is never just one cause. And I think we like to think that as Christians, that again, it goes back to it's a character flaw, or it's just chemistry. And there's so many things. There is the biological part of it. There is the environmental, and of course the volitional, which that's pointing the obvious out as far as I'm concerned. But the environmental piece is huge. It's huge. Yeah. And sure, if you're in a relationship that somebody they're dealing with their own mental illness. Yeah. Boy, oh boy, that really does have an effect. A mental and physical effect on you. Yeah. It's huge. We're all connected here. Brain and body is all connected. And we like to separate the two of them because that's just what we've done. Historically, you look at the medical field and the mental health field. We've liked to keep ourselves separate, and we're not separate. Yeah. God created this awesome being. It's all together. Yeah. Yeah, it is interesting how much like your general practitioner doesn't want to talk to your therapist because they don't those guys don't know what they're talking about. Exactly. The doctor doesn't know what they're talking about. This is what we do. Yeah, and then we just kind of fight. I like to think of it, that's why it's called practicing medicine. Yes. It's like eventually we'll get this right. We're going to use you as a guinea pig for a little while. Take this pill for a little while. Let's see what it does. Yeah. Oh, your head melted? Okay, let's try the non-head melting version of it. So it's just sad. But, we do. I think there are some medical doctors. I don't want to throw all of them under the bus. There are some that do communicate well with the mental health aspect or component, and vice versa. But if they're not, you can see how easy it is for us to doctor shop, or for that matter, doctors are human beings as well, and they think differently than the other doctor thinks. One thinks this way and the other one thinks that way. So one may look at mental illness as, well, it is a character flaw, or one may look at it is a chemistry issue. So one is going to say, no, you don't really need to have this medication, or you know what, try this medication, and the other one's like, no, try this medication. So it's difficult when you're going out to seek any sort of help in that manner.
Yeah.
And then, not to mention, once we get ourselves onto all these medications, we want to feel good, period, because I believe every human being does. We don't want to feel bad.
Yeah.
We want to feel good. So we start to measure how we feel in that moment without the medication. This is how bad I feel, and I just want it to be better. So then we take the medication, and we start to experience a little bit better, but then there's the side effects. So then we're like, well, I just want to feel better right now on this. You go to the doctor. The doctor's, I believe, is no longer treating the illness. They're treating the side effects. So here, take another medication.
Yeah.
And then take another medication to combat those side effects.
Yeah.
And then before you know it, do you even really have any idea how you're feeling anymore?
Yeah. And I imagine that trying to back away from those types of medications can be quite difficult. When you're taking this for depression and it upsets your stomach, so you take this for the upset stomach, but it gives you a headache.
Right.
So you take that for your headache, but that causes you to have also it just compounds.
Sure.
But now you've got to find some way to step off of that. And I imagine that's not something that you just decide randomly to stop taking all your medication.
Never. Well, I think the medication component of the amount of medications that we take, mental illness, physical illness, over-the-counter medications, supplements, don't forget the supplements. Do we know how all of those are going to interact? The synergistic effect that they're going to have. Yeah. Are we going to create?
So explain what that is. Most people don't understand what synergistic effect would mean.
Taking two or more chemical components or chemical medications and combining the two. And oftentimes we end up with a third.
Because the different chemicals have mixed themselves inside your body, created a whole nother drug on their own.
Whole nother drug.
Yeah. Now, there are some studies that deal with that, and you have medical interaction warnings. But from my understanding, there's not a huge amount of comparative research as to how these things mix in various physiologies. Because just like a vaccine has different reactions to people, we don't test it. I mean, there is some testing, but it's not as broad, I think, as it should be for the amount that gets prescribed.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, the psychopharmaceuticals are a billion-dollar industry.
Oh, my word. Yeah. Yeah, you would think that there would be much more research done on that. But with the amount of medications that are out there and the amount of combinations that we can have at any given moment, oh, my word. I can't even imagine the amount of research and money that would have to go into trying to figure out what we're doing to ourselves.
Yeah.
So we have to be, smart consumers and intentional on what we're taking.
Yeah. So you would recommend that when someone goes and fills a prescription, that 12-page booklet that they get about everything that, using words that most of us have no idea what it means, that they should find some way of understanding what this medication is, what's in it, how it responds to our bodies, and take that as you own your own treatment.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what about the people who just don't want to? They're so afraid of any medication at all that they just refuse because they believe that they shouldn't have to take something to correct the issue in their body. Now, these are the same people who will take an aspirin for a headache or a Motrin or something. They'll take other medication, but when it comes to that, they just won't do it.
Yeah. I got to go right to the beginning, right in Genesis. we are a fallen being. We not only have, experienced the physical abnormalities, but we have the mental abnormalities that go along with being that fallen being. And if there wasn't all these other causes, outside causes, environmental, biological, volitional, if all of those weren't in existence, then I'd say absolutely, we live in a perfect world. You don't need medications. Unfortunately, that's not the case. We are broken. Mm-hmm. And at times we do need assistance, and we do need medications, physically and mentally. But once again, we should be smart about and educated about what we're taking. And if we don't know, find somebody that does know.
Yeah.
And listen to them.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with taking medications. Absolutely nothing wrong in taking medications. It starts to get a little gray and blurry when we start taking too many medications. Obviously, we just talked about that.
Yeah.
But to go to the extreme of, one end or the other, there again, you're just taking your life and you're throwing it off balance. Mm-hmm. We can't use those extremes and expect that we're going to just march through life and that everything is going to be great and nothing's going to bother me, and I'm going to be perfectly fine. With that kind of thinking, how can you be perfectly fine?
Yeah.
You can't.
Yeah. So is part of the purpose of utilizing counseling and medication to help someone kind of get back to this area of more of a balanced mental health, should this be the counseling and the medication? Like, I've known people, and we've talked about this, people who have been on medication and in counseling with the same counselor for decades, just decades. And there's little or no progress. It's almost like there's just not a desire to see someone cured and move on. It's more like creating a client base, and it that I also know causes some people to not want to go to a counselor. Because like, no, I know some friends who have gone and they've been seeing the same counselor for 15 years and nothing in their life has changed. Right. I'm thinking, okay, so the natural question for me is, at what point is it time to, okay, I need to see someone else. All this person is doing is prescribing new medication. They're not actually helping me. Where's the line there? Because I'm not a trained psychologist. I don't know the medications.
Right from the start, you should be really talking about what is discharge, or what does the end of this look like for you, and even before that, I want to ask the question to the individual: what is your expectation in this therapy session or in counseling? What is counseling to you? Because if you give me a really obscure definition of what counseling is, and you've believed that, I'm hopeful that I can, at least correct you on that and let you know that that's not really what it is. Yeah. And it should not last forever.
Yeah. So you mean going to a counselor because that's how you get the prescription is probably a wrong way to look at it?
Yes.
What are you here for? Zoloft. Or something else, whatever. Yeah.
No. We shouldn't be going to a therapist or a counselor for an indefinite period of time. Now, there are individuals that it's more like what I would describe it as maintenance. And that may look like, I don't know, every couple months, every 6 months. Yes, somebody is checking in with their counselor just to am I on track? Those kinds of things.
Yep.
But if you're having somebody that's hanging around for, 15 years, I got to question the counselor. And you do have a right to switch therapist, counselor. You should be vetting those individuals like you vet a doctor. Mm-hmm. You should be doing the same thing. And some people mix and some people don't mix. But if you're in that counseling mode for 15 years, are you dependent upon that individual to, make those life decisions for you? The counselor should be there telling you right from the get-go. That should have never even, occurred to begin with. But if it does, man, you better turn around and run.
Yeah.
Because they're A, either incompetent, B, after your money.
Yeah.
Well,
it is a lucrative business.
It's very lucrative. But again, we should be vetting those individuals.
Yeah.
And making sure that we're getting what we're paying for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I almost went to see a counselor once, but then I just started watching Frasier.
Who is awesome.
I'm listening. Sorry.
I love Frasier.
It is pretty good.
It's got to be my
Samantha loves
favorite.
it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So see, I'm stuck on that. Cozy TV from 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock.
Yep.
2 episodes.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, with Frasier, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
That or MASH.
Oh, I watch that too. So we have digressed.
Yes, that's fine. This is what editing is for.
That's good.
Yeah. So, with the amount of young people who are experiencing the issues that they're experiencing, depression, anxiety, part of me wonders if any of these kids are actually truly experiencing these things, or they just saw it on TV and decided they're going to go to a counselor.
Oh, yes.
But at what point would you say for a Christian family? I mean, at what point is it time to go see someone? And I'm not talking about going to see your pastor, because there's as a pastor there is a point, and I hope anyone who might be watching, that there is a point where I have to understand that I am not qualified to do professional level counseling. I mean, we're here for, as ministers, we're here for a certain number of things, but I am not a replacement for a trained individual in this field. It'd be like me saying, yeah, I can take care of your bypass, just come on in the office. I mean, I'm not qualified for that. I should know that. So I should know that there's other qualifications that I don't have. So as a Christian family or a couple, when is it time to go past friend level counseling and into the professional setting?
Oh, well, first looking at what's normal and what's not normal. It's normal for all of us to have bouts of sadness. It's normal to have anxiety. When it goes beyond that is when your life functioning is being, definitely interfered, or there is some sort of interference going on with that. When you are starting to feel sadness over a long period of time, that loss of pleasure that we talked about earlier, if that's there, is there, the thoughts of suicide? Suicidal ideation, that I think especially because I deal with a lot of young people, and just the thoughts of suicide. With or without a plan. I don't really care if you have a plan or not. I want to talk to you.
Yeah, just that general idea that there's no reason for me to be around.
And that you are even entertaining suicide. That would be something that I would say to a family. Okay, I think maybe it's time that you seek out somebody, because your loved one is thinking about this. And again, I think if we pay attention to those things and not just in our own lives, but in those that we love, pay attention to the behaviors. Are behaviors changing? Is personality changing?
Well, that's interesting. Yeah. So what are some things that you would look at as far as how can you tell if someone's personality is changing? I mean, behaviors are one thing.
Sure.
That could be all over the place.
Sure.
But how do you spot personality changes?
Okay, well, if somebody was always an outgoing individual and really interacted frequently with the family, and then all of a sudden they've become such an introvert because, prior to that they were very extroverted. That was their personality, outgoing, always right there to talk to you, always just, I think your red flag should go up. and I'm not just saying this is, a one-time thing, because again, that's fairly normal for all of us to experience those bouts of, the up and down of moods. That's normal. Looking at your teenager too, what's normal developmental stage? It is normal for a teenager to be, da, 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 da. Very normal. And I get parents that are losing their mind. My child won't come out of their room. How old is your child? Well, they're 13. Yeah, they're 13.
Yep.
That's normal. Very normal. But once again, when you go back to looking at a personality, if that is extended over a period of time, and 9 times out of 10, in any criteria when you're going to diagnose anybody, a length of time, an onset, something has to be in there, to differentiate between normal and abnormal.
Yep.
So it is abnormal, let's say, for little Johnny to be, isolating himself and not coming down for dinner, all of that. Okay. That is abnormal for little Johnny, when he was always right there, talking, always interacting. It had stopped. It could be a number of reasons why, but nonetheless, I think that we should seek some help.
Take the time, pay attention to the people you're around.
Absolutely.
And take a little bit of ownership is probably the wrong word, but responsibility for one another.
Well, sure, and I think you just hit it right on the head. It is a responsibility for one another, and biblically, we need to keep an eye on each other and make sure we are okay.
Yeah, we're commanded to bear one another's burdens, and we can't do that if we don't know what someone's burdens are.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think pride gets in the way sometimes. With
American Christians, come on. Yeah. We're all amazing.
I know.
That's right.
I know.
Yes.
I know.
I'm the head and not the tail. I'm above and not below.
Yeah.
I'm lying to myself,
Well, and in the end, if you look at it, who are you hurting? Yourself. That is it.
Yeah.
And then we get stuck on that merry-go-round, that cyclical merry-go-round. And in my head, this is always what I hear. It's like the circus music. When I see somebody's life, and mine included, I'm not going to exclude myself from this. When I start hearing that circus music playing, I'm like, holy cow, I better jump off now.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you do?
Yeah. Well,
It is.
But if we as parents, if we pay attention to our children, and most of us, we try our best to, pay attention to that. Pay attention to grandma too. I mean, that's something we cannot forget. The elderly in any of this,
Yes.
they suffer just as much, if not more.
For Christians, as we are looking at the people who desperately don't want to go see a counselor, they either can't afford it, they don't like the stigma. In New York, they're afraid of getting their guns taken away because that's a reality. Because the last thing you want to do is tell a doctor you're depressed and you also own a pistol. Right. That way the police can come to your house and they're coming to take you away. Ha ha, hee hee, oh. Anyway, so for people who are desperately trying to avoid these things, and there are factors in our lives. There's environmental factors. There's our sleep. There's our food. Physical fitness. I mean, all of these things play into this. So how do we approach that from a standpoint of taking ownership of those situations in our lives before we go see a counselor? What are some things that we should be doing in order to get our minds right to the best of our ability at home?
Well, and if it is, you don't want to see somebody for all the reasons that you just gave. I think it becomes pretty simple then. Ask yourself some of the questions. Have I really owned up to what is my responsibility? Do I know what I can control and what I can't control? Have I tried some of the things like, let's just say, thoughts? Have I changed my thought pattern? Obviously, for some of us, we're not going to be able to change some of the environmental things. Significant other, we can't change that. But have you been able to change reactions to the environmental? That's huge. Huge. Mm-hmm. If you've done all of that, wonderful. That's great. And you're starting to see some things changing. Wonderful. If you're not, okay, then maybe it is time that you go and find somebody. Talk to somebody.
Yep.
Yes, it's still, we're going to be looking at, people are still scared. There's that stigma that's there. But if you are able to talk to somebody that knows other individuals, therapists, they've seen them, okay, then try that avenue. It's worth a shot.
Yep. What about other factors like taking care of our diet, sleep, things like that?
Yikes. Again, that's my favorite. And we could probably have a whole new podcast that would last for hours and hours and hours talking about sleep and diet and exercise. All of this is connected. The brain and the body's connected. If the brain is not well, the body's probably not well. If the body's not well, the brain's probably not well. So if we're living on Little Debbie's and Twinkies, and peanut butter M&Ms,
these are like vitamins.
They kind of look like
I've seen vitamins the same color, like Centrum, complete from A to Zinc.
I know.
And these,
don't mistake them as that, though.
You know why these have M's on them? Because when you put them together, they just go.
If we live on a steady diet of those, though, if we live on a steady diet of peanut butter M&Ms, which I'm not opposed to because I really
What if I only eat the green ones because they look like vegetables?
Then you're fine. You're fine.
I love
There's absolutely nothing wrong with that.
You see, sometimes you just got to think through the issue.
You do. Green, vegetable, you're good. Careful.
It's all good. Everything's good. Yep.
On a serious note, no, really, if we are living on a diet of sugar, diet of processed foods, we can't expect that is going to be feed our brains. And once again, I think we separate the brain and the body, and we forget that the brain, controls the body. This is an important organ. If we don't take care of it and feed it properly with nutritious food that comes from the earth, not the stuff that's like, well, it's got like 0.0000005 or 4% vegetable or fruit.
Yep. It's like the picture of the breakfast cereal that's nothing but sugar, but they put a glass of orange juice next to it.
Oh, that just changes it
And they say, part of this complete breakfast.
Absolutely.
Wait a second, the only thing complete is the orange juice. And that's actually only got half orange in it. Everything else is artificial
sugar
flavor.
And yes. So if we do pay attention to what we're eating, and I think that scares a lot of us, because then we have to make a lifestyle change.
Yep.
I don't believe in diets. I think diets are temporary. Lifestyle change is permanent, and we give the diet industry way too much money. I think when it really is, it's not as difficult as a diet.
Focusing on fads.
Yeah, yeah.
We think that's because we've lost 5 pounds. Now we can go back to the life that we had before.
Right. Or I love these commercials. Wait, you can just take this pill and you can sit on your couch and you don't even have to change your lifestyle. You can still eat chips and you can eat a 5-gallon bucket of dip with your chips. You don't have to change anything.
I get 10 or 12 emails a week that are for pills, for diet pills, and all the emails start out the same way. George's fat belly. Or George's jiggly arms. And I think they do that to get your attention.
Well, they do.
Really, it just irritates me.
They do.
Because I think they're watching me. And so I just hit delete. It's like, no. Because if I read it, I'm accepting that title or some nonsense, things like that. It's just, it's
well,
it's unfortunate.
Yes, and if they attack you with emotion, man, they gotcha.
Yep.
They gotcha.
You don't have to be gross anymore. Hey! What if I like being gross?
Yeah.
Yes, it is unfortunate, but
it is. I mean, the truth is, if I think back, I remember when I was a kid, and I still remember, my mother telling me, eat right, eat, a balanced, have a balanced diet, get your sleep, get your exercise. If you don't know what a balanced diet is, then get educated on it.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I'm one of the things we learned in culinary dealing with restaurants is there's a lot of people like to think they're like the microwave gourmet, and so they get these healthy microwave meals, and they don't realize that the process of microwaving by itself. And if any of you have not figured this out yet, the microwave on its own kills just about any nutritional value that meal has. Yeah. Because it changes something in the molecular structure of the water.
Yeah.
Here's an experiment you guys can try at home. Take two plants, identical plants, and microwave a gallon of water, and then boil a gallon of water, and then let those cool, and then water the plants with the different water. The microwave water will kill the plants.
Are you kidding me?
Oh, absolutely. No, this is proven.
So it's not distilled like it would be if you boiled it.
Not at all. Not at all.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, there's something about the microwave process that actually changes the molecular structure in the water that actually makes it detrimental to life.
Wow.
And it does this for any and everything that you microwave. The same thing has happened. So when you microwave vegetables and things like that, you're not just heating them up. You're actually creating a different molecular structure, and they're not healthy for you at that point. Yeah. That's why, if you take a raw carrot and you pop it in the microwave for just a couple of minutes, mostly it just blows up.
Right.
And when you take it out and you taste it, there's something about it. I mean, anyone who's familiar with whatever you're tasting, there's something about it that has changed. And it might technically be cooked, but even actually a microwave baked potato is probably a better example, because people will poke holes in it and they'll put it in a plate and put a little water on it and wrap it up and then throw it in the microwave. And
it never tastes.
It never tastes right, because if you take it out of the oven, technically they're both cooked. Not necessarily the same way, dry heat, wet heat, however you want to look at it, but the molecular structure of that thing is now not good for you. And it's not just not nutritionally balanced, it's actually now a step backwards for what you're doing. And anything you microwave, it does exactly the same thing too. Yeah, it's really kind of scary, but but microwaves don't come with warnings.
No.
Because no one wants to talk about that.
Okay, so does food too?
Yes.
Sometimes.
If you have to light it and smoke it, it will. Yeah.
Well, and again, you're talking about a way of, heating your food, cooking your food. Similarly, when we're eating processed food, and the way that it was processed, we are now putting that into our bodies. And how can that not build up toxins in your body?
Yes. And when it comes to any kind of processed food, especially a processed meat.
Yeah.
So like when you buy chicken nuggets at the store, when you open that chicken nugget up, if you don't see grain in the meat
grain.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then it's not actually all meat.
Then it's like a filler or
exactly.
Whatever.
And all of those fillers, they may be biologically designed, but they're usually made out of some degree of animal aspic or animal gelatin, and they're a lot of sandwich meats. We think, oh look, I'm eating sandwich meat. I mean, this is healthy. They don't realize that that's actually liquefied.
Yeah,
and then the liquid it's if you ever see sandwich meat that's in a shape like a square.
Wrong.
Have you ever gone to a farm and seen square pigs? Oh, that one's obviously Hormel, right? It doesn't. They're all walking around with square legs because that's where. No, not at all.
Wrong.
They'll take the occasional piece of meat, whole piece of meat, and they'll drop it in there. But it is, if you ever watch the process, it is a liquid that's mixed with types of gelatin, and it's just put in the mold. that gets cold and they can slice it all up. It's disgusting.
It is.
McDonald's chicken nuggets
I can't even.
might have some chicken in it.
Might.
But if you
keyword.
if you ever get a pack of 20, I did this, and you start looking, you'll start to find all the shapes that are all the same. You're like, wait a minute.
Cookie cutter.
Where did they find chickens that looked the same like this? Like, that's because you still think it's chicken, you know? But it literally comes. It's like sent out on a conveyor, and they're stamping different shapes. But it's like a puzzle. All the shapes fit in with one another, so it looks random. But it's not. Yeah, it's
Well, then, and again, imagine we're putting all of this into our bodies, and we're not putting anything that technically belongs there.
Yeah.
And then expect to be fine. Expect not to experience, and research is out there as far as sugar, processed sugar.
White sugar especially.
White sugar.
It's more addictive than cocaine.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
And how it plays into our mental health, in mental illness, depression. Crazy.
Yep.
Just crazy. And again, if all we're eating is sugar-laced food, processed food, all of that, and barely getting anything in there that has any nutritional value, you can only imagine what that's doing, not just to the physical that you can see.
Yeah.
What is it doing to up here,
Yeah.
to that brain?
How do you think that plays into, when you think about the rise of the amount of processed food that was available when I was a kid?
Minimal.
Very different from the amount of processed food that's available today.
Minimal.
And it used to be that it was more expensive to buy the processed stuff. Now the processed stuff is half the cost of your grocery bill. But at the same time, the rise of attention deficit disorder, hyperactivity in kids, it had exploded around the same time. And the food industry went, I don't know what you're talking about.
Of course.
So if a parent was asking you about their crazy hyperactive kid, I mean, do you go to the diet right off the bat?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And if you don't, then I would be questioning, especially if you didn't go into a therapist, or let's say you went to your doctor and the doctor didn't even ask, what's that child into? But as far as a therapist, as far as I'm concerned, yep, those are the things that I look at. I look at sleep and I look at food. Those two things are, in my point of view and in my opinion, are really, really key to a lot.
Yeah.
A lot.
What if you're talking to a therapist and and they look at your child, and the first thing they say is, well, okay, this is obviously ADHD, so we're going to put this on a medication. And that's they haven't really looked at any of the other environmental factors. Is this a sign that, okay, so maybe I want a second opinion?
Yeah, you might want to turn around and run.
Yeah.
Your red flag should go up. It should go up. Because once again, we're not cookie cutter. We're not those chicken nuggets.
Yep.
We have so many other things that we have to think about. You've got to think about all of that. You've got to think about the biology, the genetic component. You've got to think about the environmental. You've got to think about the food, our diet. Is little Johnny sitting in front of the video game all day long and eating junk, and he can't even barely move because he doesn't want to disrupt his game, so everything is
those
right
thumbs are they're right there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And that is like, that's frightening to me when when that is not, when we're not paying attention to that with our children. That alone is something else that it's another podcast that you can have. What is that doing to a child's brain when they are sitting there in that fast-paced world of the video game, and everything is like right there. It's doom, 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 doom. That brain is just. Can you make a connection with an ADHD? Can you see where that might possibly start to connect?
Yeah.
It's quite possible.
Yeah. I looked at some studies a few years ago. I don't know how much more has been done on this, but they were talking about the amount of how early age screen time rewires a child's brain to receive stimuli, correction, reward, and joy in a way that is almost incompatible with a normal
Right.
one-on-one relationship with a person. And it's interesting. We're seeing a lot of because a lot of the kids that were in those would have been in those studies before are now in college. Wonderfully telling all of the productive adults in their life how they've gotten everything wrong forever and how they're going to fix everything, even though they need safe spaces and they can't handle a monument. But it's
A monument.
can you imagine?
I can't.
Yeah.
I can't. We're
Yeah.
just gonna cancel them all.
That's right. I chose to go to this university, but now it must change its name because it
Hurts my little heart.
hurts my yeah. And the government should pay for my student loans
Well, they
because
should.
my 4-year degree in lesbian dance theory is
Or Slovakian
totally
studies.
legitimate.
Yes.
Slovakian studies.
Yes. Yeah, I love that one.
Yeah, that's just
Yeah.
Okay, yep.
Yeah, well, but again, you right back to looking at how all of that the gaming and food and all it's huge on our brains. And you take a little person's brain and you are rewiring them. How can you not be rewiring them? They're growing. Their brains are growing. For the most part, our brains don't stop. At least the frontal cortex doesn't stop growing until we're 25.
Yeah.
Ish.
I find it interesting. They did a survey of tech company executives, and the majority of them don't allow their children to use the products that they're selling. Like Bill Gates doesn't let his kid. Steve Jobs didn't want his kids using recommended. Like I think it was his grandkids. One of them, I'm going to get the name wrong. Someone's going to call me out on it.
Oh, yeah.
One of them, they were basically like,
hate
I
mail.
don't want my kids to use iPads. I don't want them on cell phones.
Right.
I don't want them on TV. I
Right.
want them outside. But they're selling these things
Oh my
by the
gosh.
billions around the world.
There's so much study out there on what it takes for a human being to become addicted to your screen.
Yeah.
They know the psychological part of it. They just didn't, it's not a scientist that's putting this all together. They've got people that know psychology that are putting these things together. That put all of that. What's going to keep us coming back to that?
Yep.
It just wasn't, the scientists didn't do that.
Yeah. Was it Pavlov that basically talked about triggering a behavior with a sound?
Yeah, it's conditioning.
Yeah.
Pavlov's
Pavlov's dog, yes.
Yeah,
and
it's
how when
conditioning.
our phone goes beep,
Yes.
we're like,
"Oh!"
what's on my phone? Someone is trying to reach me and I must answer.
Yes, we are. Human beings are very easily conditioned, very easily, and we don't think we are. Phone is a perfect example. I mean, I could again go to another whole podcast on how easy we are conditioned.
Things like social media, when we're talking about people who fall into depression and suicidal thoughts because their posts don't get enough likes and they're not getting out there enough, and like so many
Sad.
their friend has 10,000 friends and they only have 9,000 friends.
Sad.
So they're
The
not loved as
acceptance.
much.
Yeah, the acceptance and how we now have really based our lives on the acceptance of other human beings and how that's so important. It's
Yeah.
pretty sad.
Our joy centers. Everyone wants the
Oh,
thumbs
the
up,
thumbs up.
you know.
Well,
Yeah, I got more thumbs up than hearts. I don't know why.
yep, sad to see where we're at. But this is where we're at. And unfortunately, okay, you could put yourself in a little box and just hide out in a closet somewhere, or right back to finding the balance in all of it. They're innately, our computer isn't bad. Innately, a video game isn't bad. These aren't bad.
These are
modern.
wonderful.
Yes,
These
they are.
yes.
And and again, the green ones.
They're like vegetables. And the
Vegetables. red
red ones I can actually think are tomatoes.
Well, then they're
Like little round pieces of
just
joy.
keep telling yourself that, George.
It's the reason why I wear dark colored shirts. Turn the lights down really low.
Yep.
That way
Dim.
I look less like a grape than I normally would.
I was thinking Barney, but
Oh no! Well, okay, it's fine. I can just trust that I love you, you love me, it's all.
Oh,
Anyway.
my word. Oh, okay.
So would you say that, so from a parental standpoint, knowing that these kind of things become triggers and they become addictive, compulsive behaviors, how would you recommend parents approach kids, especially younger kids, to avoid getting sucked into that trap? But at the same time, there are parents who are well into that trap.
Oh, goodness,
who need to get their way out, and usually you either have a slow backpedaling or you have cold turkey, and kids don't like just stop anything.
No.
So how do you start? I mean, because you can't get away from phones and things like that and screens.
No, it's a part of our lives.
They're going to be a part of our life, yeah. So how would you recommend parents help kids move into that in a safe way, but at the same time, parents who are just they're lost in it and they don't know how to get out of it?
Well, and there you got it right there. Modeling that behavior, and yes, if they're lost in it, if parents are lost in it, I'm not going to say it's a lost cause, because it's not. But you have to look at your own behaviors first, and our first culture as growing up is our parents. They teach us those things. So if we're not modeling those good behaviors, how can we expect our children to follow through with any of those things that we want for them? We've got to start it. Plain and simple. Got to take responsibility for ourselves and do those things. And then we can start teaching our children moderation. But if I'm, doing this all day in front of my phone and little Johnny's trying to get my attention and I'm just doing whatever, what do I expect from that poor child?
It's going to do the same thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Not only have you just disconnected from another human being, and worse yet, it's your own child you've disconnected, and you're really starting to, holy crow, we could really talk about some attachment issues that you're going to be dealing with because you're just not present. You're there, but you're not present in that child's life.
Yep. Yeah.
Model behaviors.
So you're saying things like maybe having dinner around the table.
Yes.
Instead of everyone having dinner somewhere in the living room.
In front of the television. Or with their phone, swiping. Yeah, it really kind of sounds, old-fashioned and whatnot. But I'll tell you what, there's a lot to be said for all of that. We know it. We've seen it.
Yeah.
We've seen it.
I did a little bit of a research on Facebook, just social media in general. The average person spends 3 hours of their day on social media. The average Facebook user will log into their account 12 times a day. That's the average. There's some that are way, way, way over that.
Right.
And I keep thinking, how in the world do people have 3 hours a day to spend on social media?
I know it.
And I realized that, and this just sounds weird, how many people are sitting on the toilet with their phone in their hand.
Their legs are falling asleep.
Because they want to finish that video,
Yes.
Yes. Oh my gosh, how we are so addicted.
Yes, we are.
And then I realize I might do some of these things. Oh no.
I think we're all
crazy.
Yeah, we're all at fault of that. But if we're aware of those things, then it's our responsibility at that point, because we are now aware to make those changes. If we have an unhealthy relationship with social media, it's our responsibility to step in and start cutting back on that. And especially if we have children, because we do want to model good behavior so they don't end up falling into the same traps that we fall into. We always want better for our kids, or at least we say we do.
Yeah.
Well, if you truly do, then step up to the plate. And it is going to be rough. No one ever said it was going to be easy.
Yep.
But, is parenting easy anyway?
It's not supposed to be.
No.
You're raising a little life that is based off of yours.
Yes.
And they're going to be as difficult as you are.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But if we just take that responsibility, and again, if we don't have children and we're finding that we're sitting on the toilet and our legs are falling asleep and we're all because we can't get away from it for whatever reason, you might want to scale back a little bit. If it's starting to, and this is with anything, if you're starting to feel some negative effect with whatever it is, your phone, your mental health, your food intake, whatever, then that should be a red flag if you're starting to experience that in your life. And it may not just necessarily be something that you feel. You may not think anything's wrong, but maybe you got somebody else in your world that's saying to you, you kind of spend an awful lot of time in front of that screen.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously they're wrong.
Well, yes, of course. Yes. Don't listen to them.
Yeah, they're wrong. They're ungodly.
Yes.
They're not trying to help you be responsible or anything like that.
Absolutely
and they should be
not.
avoided at all costs.
Absolutely. But we should pay attention. And what happens, though, I think, with a lot of us, is when somebody points out those things that are excessive, we get angry. And we don't want to own up to. It's so much easier just to get angry. And then the anger serves a really great purpose, not just, for you because you're mad that they pointed something out, but that also sends a message to that person. Shut up, because you're going to, ensue this in me, and that other person's not going to want to do that again because they don't want to have to hear the wrath coming out.
So that mechanism to help you stay controlled is now disabled.
Absolutely.
Because you've basically beat it into some sort of weird submission.
Absolutely.
I'm gonna do this one more time because this is gonna recycle again. Oh, it already has.
It says.
There we go. Now I'll be able to see when it actually shows.
Yikes! Don't look it. Holy cow! Don't zoom in on me. Jeepers, George.
Extreme close up.
Don't do that.
So let's talk about compulsive behavior and addictions, because that doesn't affect anyone in the church.
No, absolutely not.
There's no alcoholism in the church. There's no drug addiction in the church. Pornography doesn't happen to anyone. And
Never.
we all think that these are separate behaviors that people with ungodly lives fall into because obviously they're not serving God in any real way.
Right.
But we both know that compulsive behaviors and things like that, they're not forced upon you by some sort of demon. They're things that we learn in our lives.
Absolutely.
So how do we recognize those things? How do we avoid them early on? And what do we do when we find ourselves in the middle of them? And specifically when we get to that part, I want to talk about Ravi Zacharias.
Yes.
And how someone like that can fall into that category. Right. So let's start.
Well, I think let's start with the first part of it. How to not fall into that. Again, balance. Alcohol. Let's use alcohol as the example. There is a balance in that. Can I have a glass of wine? Well, you sure can. You sure can. Biblically, there's nothing in the Bible that says, George, you cannot have a glass of wine. That's or right. You cannot have a drink.
Does the size of the glass matter?
Yes, it does.
Technically, the bottle is glass.
Serving size does matter.
All right, so now we're back to moderation.
Yes, yes. 12 ounces of beer, 1.5 ounces of liquor, 4 ounces of wine. That is a serving size. Yes, and, it looks like we're being robbed, but when we only get that much.
They pour it. Where's the rest?
Yes, you're ripping me off. But serving size, absolutely. And in as far as the Bible is concerned, no, that is not. That's not wrong. What is wrong is when we take it to the next level. Maybe not even the next level. Let's look at the next level though. Let's look at the abuse part of it, what I call abuse. Because there's when I look at it, there's like a use, abuse, and then there's a dependency in addiction. There's this it's linear. It is never just an event. It is a process, and it is a linear process that happens to us. So we dabble in a little alcohol, and we like it because it feels good. And it gives us that euphoric feeling, which anybody that goes into it, I just drink it just because I like the taste of it. Really?
Yeah.
Okay, you might be the minority. Most people, no, they like the buzz. If you really want to get technical, we like to feel good.
Yep.
We do. All right, so we're taking it to the next level, which in my opinion is abuse. Okay, so now I'm starting to amp it up a little bit. And now I'm really starting to go into the unbiblical, where I'm using more to get that initial feeling that I got, that initial buzz. My tolerance is now building up. Now I'm starting to experience drunkenness.
Yeah.
Okay, no. When we start to get to that point, well, absolutely, we know what the Bible says on drunkenness. We know what it says.
Yep.
All right, we're on that linear line. We're still cruising down that line, and it's not like one day you just wake up and you're addicted. Doesn't happen like that, because once again, it's not an event. It's a process.
Yeah.
So you've went from the use, you live some time in the abuse, and you end up drinking more or using more or watching more porn or whatever it is.
You need a little more.
A little
to
bit
get
more
to the
each
same
time.
Thing.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. Because the tolerance level is built. And there is a mental tolerance along with a physical tolerance.
Yeah.
It just happens.
Yep.
Then you do end up crossing over that line. You hit the point of no return.
Yeah.
Prior to that, you got a 50-50 chance. There is a point where you can, if you get some help, where you can go either direction. You can continue and you can go over that line and become totally addicted or dependent. Or you can turn around and go back and live a life of just use. And I'm not talking about, I'm going to take pornography out of that, because that I do not.
Yeah, there's
none.
Yeah.
No.
Yep.
But using alcohol as the example again.
Yeah. I've known people my whole life. After 20 years in the restaurant industry, we as a kid we spent a lot of time in Germany, and beer is a normal part of the German diet.
Absolutely.
And you don't mess with that part of the diet, because they're very protective of that particular part of the diet.
Many countries enjoy, yes.
Yeah, and in every different part of the world, there's some area of alcohol that kind of describes them. You get into South America, it's tequila. You get into Russia, it's vodka. You get into England and Scotland, and it becomes whiskey and Scotch, and it's all of these different areas. In the France, it's wine. And in America, we don't know, because we're just drinking it.
Yes.
But I've seen people, so I ran restaurants and I ran bars, all very successfully. Before becoming a pastor, I ran a microbrewery, and people looked at me weird, like, I don't know how you can do that and still say that you're ministering the gospel.
Yeah.
But they forget that you can't control what you're not involved with. So while being part of that industry, I was also able to put in a degree of control and accountability within the midst of that. It was difficult, but it was there. But I met more people who had to start drinking at 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning. And it was usually some sort of wine or something, and it was their only way. They'd gotten to that point where they actually couldn't function in their jobs. They weren't nowhere near as creative. They weren't as eloquent. The things were more difficult to come to their mind. People like Eric Clapton come to mind, where all of their creativity happened around these substance abuses. And then they get clean, and people are like, oh, you were so much more fun when you were drinking. Thinking, oh my gosh, how do we get there? But you watch people who come in and their life is about leaving work, coming to the bar.
It's sad.
And getting to the point where they can forget their day. It's horrible to watch, but it was a normal part of life.
Oh, sure. When you're working in the food industry, oh my word.
Yeah.
That's it's a given. In the food industry.
Might as well just be called the alcohol industry.
It might as well be.
It's just basically what was going on there.
But with any addiction, it's you can pretty much see what's going to happen. And again, if somebody hits that point of no return, and then becomes addicted or dependent, the likelihood of being able to go back to a use mode is probably not going to happen. It's probably not going to happen. Yep. You've already changed enough pathways in your brain that if you tasted that alcohol, wow, it's easy to send you right back to where you ended in your addiction.
Yeah.
Quickly. quickly.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to say it's not unheard of, because I don't think that there is, 100% in that, but it's very, very rare
Yeah.
for somebody to get to that dependency part and then be able to go back to that use part.
And watching people who come to Christ get clean, and then they think, because I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me,
Right.
they think, well, now, I don't have to
I'm
drink
good.
myself into oblivion. I can just have the occasional beer. And they find
No.
it becomes this very difficult lesson that no, they can't.
No, and we forget. Again, we forget. Even though we've come to know Christ, we still forget we're still human beings.
Yeah.
And we still are a fallen being. And there's still other factors that play into that. And it's wonderful that we do come to Christ, but we still have to be very cognizant of that old lifestyle.
Yeah.
And be fully aware that we can jump right back into that at any given moment.
Yeah.
And there are triggers to any of it.
That's why they call them vices.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what do you do? What do you do when you're stuck in the middle of it? When you're, especially as a Christian, and I have this conversation constantly that I'm a Christian, I have no addictions. Okay. My first thought is pride and lying, I think, is an addiction to you right there, because you're unwilling to admit the reality of your life. Mm-hmm. But when you're in a church and people who are even like serving on teams, and they end up, and I'm actually going to be talking about this more in other podcasts, they end up not only stuck in the vice, but they end up in this position where they're actually afraid to get help, because getting the help will actually destroy them in their church community, which to me is sickening.
Well, it is.
But
It
it's a reality
Yeah.
of the world
It
that we
is.
live in, and my hope is that we can do something to help people find the help that they need.
Right.
And then they're all too often too afraid to go get.
Well, and first of all, I think we have to, if we don't have some, poor defense mechanism that's getting in the way of us recognizing that we even have a problem. Denial is the first, and is the worst defense mechanism when it comes to addiction. That'll keep us away from ever admitting that there is a problem.
Yep.
I've had individuals that are alcoholics, that are under the influence, say to me, I haven't had a drink in days.
Yeah, and you can smell it all over them.
My.
Yep.
And I was born at night, but it wasn't last night.
Yep.
No, it's denial. When that is so solid, and it's true. You look at all the defense mechanisms that we use as human beings. Denial is one of them, and yet we're thinking, well, that person knows.
Mm-hmm.
Well, sometimes they know. No.
Yeah.
No. You really are living in an alternate reality. I'm serious. It becomes their own little world, their own little denial that they're living in.
Yeah.
And when you'd mentioned Ravi, and I know you want to talk about that later, but I really do believe there was a lot of denial that was going on with Ravi.
Yeah. It's kind of like, I know when I was originally battling in my own life, the secret almost became an old friend.
Oh goodness, it feels good.
Yeah.
Feels good.
You, as weird as it sounds, I mean, when you hear people talk about women in abusive relationships, and they stay there knowing that this is a horrible thing, but it's what they know, and they know how to exist in that environment.
It's comfortable.
Yeah,
Well,
for alcoholics, they know their friends. They know, my friends at the bar care more about me than my friends at the church, and you think, you believe that, you actually believe that, but those friends are pouring poison into you. And helping your marriage to dissolve, and encouraging you to do things that no one should be encouraging anyone to do. But we get this in our head that trying to help someone get better is worse than helping them just be happy where they are. Why can't you just be happy for me? Because you're killing yourself.
Addiction is evil, and it does take on the appearance of a love affair. It does. You protect that addiction.
It's a good analogy, yeah.
You protect it with all your might. You will protect it because that has become a comfortable friend of yours, your best friend, your addiction.
We've known each other for a long time. Oh, good to know. Yeah.
We protect it, and we will do whatever it takes to maintain that relationship. And even if our relationships with humans suffer, we will still protect that relationship to no end. And again, you got to look at the defense mechanisms that we've employed into our being just to keep it alive.
Yeah. The lengths we'll go to hide things.
We will.
Yeah. So let's talk about Robbie, 'cause he's a great modern example. So someone who has had undeniably global Christian influence. Decades and decades. If I'm not mistaken, it was a little over 40 years was his ministry, and or somewhere close to that, of teaching people what it means to live a godly life. One of his key arguments for a long time was always the absolute moral truth of the Bible. But for 10 or 15 years, at least, that we know of, he was stuck in this. Like this Jekyll and Hyde life, where he had developed not only a weakness to the issue, and I should probably explain what the issue is for anyone who may not know, but he actually began to protect and nurture the predatory nature of the issue. So for any of you guys who aren't familiar with this, Ravi, then you need to go back and listen to my podcast on porn, sex, and immorality within the church. But for Cliff Notes, basically, Ravi is a global apologist. He traveled the world teaching the Bible, but he fell into a series of immoral relationships with massage therapists, to the point where some of them were categorized as rape or groomed, not just sexual misconduct, but sexual abuse. And he did this for decades and really went to great extremes to protect it. But I mean, we're not even just talking about being good at lying. We're talking about buying real estate to have a place where this can happen.
Absolutely.
Sheltering money so you can pay people to, we don't know if he was paying people just be quiet or just to be available.
Right.
You know, and disciplining people within his own ministry who I think were actually be able to see there was something wrong here, and because they were touching this issue that he needed desperately to protect, that he just couldn't. He actually disciplined them, you know, within the ministry, and to me, I don't understand the psychology of someone able to write and speak the way he did, but so willing to not only live the life, but groom people into the life. I mean, that is so far away from
It is.
You know, it's almost like schizophrenia, you know, where there's two completely different components to that person.
Or dissociative disorder, where you're looking at somebody that has, like, you know, different personalities or whatever.
Yeah.
The layers, though, George, the layers that we're looking at with what was going on with Ravi, huge, just huge.
Yeah.
You're looking at addiction. You're looking at even some psychopathy.
I have no idea what that word means, but it's a really cool sounding word, so explain it.
Psychopathy is an area of study. Okay. You know, it's not a mental disorder. It's an area of study. But just looking at some of the things that we're hearing that you know, some of the individuals that were involved with him went through, you know, there was like this lack of empathy.
Yes. Almost like he had a right to be this person. Right. Like he had earned this. One lady he actually referred to as his reward for serving God. And that blew me away.
Scary.
Like I couldn't believe it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, when you start looking at you know, the psychopathy of it, or some of the characteristics that are coming out, you know, and then you're looking at you know, maybe possibly lack of empathy, you know, lack of just the caring for others, which again would be that empathy. I start to really look at some of the personality disorders that are out there. A little bit of narcissism, a little bit of antisocial, a lot of all of those, put together, and you've really made this individual. But then there was the other side.
Yeah.
How he was able to again, I'm looking at layers. I don't even know how to really take this all apart, because it's intricate. It is so intricate.
Yeah.
You've got addiction. You've got, again, how I would look at some possible personality disorders, the psychopathy of it all. It's layered. I absolutely see the denial part.
Yeah.
Where the addiction component is worked into that.
Yeah.
I also, again, see some of personality disorder where, you know what, you really just don't matter. It's all about me.
Yeah. Yeah.
To feel that I am entitled.
Yeah. Now, do you think, and this is just me asking a question because I don't know this field quite enough, but in my mind, because all of his issues centered around massage therapists and back treatment, he did suffer a very massive back injury.
He did.
And part of me wonders if he didn't get into actually seeking help legitimately at some point and
I'm
going
sure.
to see a massage therapist.
Yeah.
And ended up getting into the wrong one that had services that should not have been rendered.
Yeah.
And that opening up a door to him. And part of me wonders if that brought him to a place where an indiscretion or a slip, maybe, for someone who travels as much as he did, if he was just weak at some point in time,
Sure.
opened himself up to that. And then realized that if that got out at all, it would completely destroy him and his ministry.
Absolutely.
And from the psychology standpoint, when you develop a protection mechanism around that, does it make sense that all of the other things that happen, all of those other layers of dissociative disorders, the lack of empathy, could that all stem from that as just carrying that protection mechanism on? I mean, do those things link, or is that something that he carried much longer and it just opened it up?
Yeah, I would have to say, and just in studying, some of those disorders, they just don't happen. It's just, I just didn't, unless you had some major, a traumatic brain injury, I would lean on the side of that stuff just didn't crop up.
Yeah.
I think there may have been, a tendency, maybe possibly in there for those things to have already existed. Yeah. And then, like you were explaining, wrong place, wrong time. And he's a man. He was a human being. Mm-hmm. There's nothing in there saying that just because we put him up on this pedestal, which is our bad for doing that to human beings, he's no different than we are.
Yep.
We are all on the same playing field.
Yep.
But if it was wrong place, wrong time, and because he was a human being, and human beings have needs and have all of that builds us.
Yeah.
At a weak moment. I'd like to believe that's what it really was, but in after reading and looking at everything else that goes along with it,
it's hard to see. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know, honestly. I think there's way too many layers, and I don't have enough information to really draw a good conclusion, an educated conclusion. It's just sad.
Yeah.
It's really sad. But again, you can see how addiction can truly destroy.
Yeah. Yeah. The lengths you'll go to feed it and protect it.
Absolutely. I got to go back to it is a relationship with our addiction. We do have that. It is a friendship, a best friend, a companion, all of that, and we will protect it.
Yeah.
And like you said, he went to great lengths to protect his.
Yeah.
Great lengths.
Yeah. When it all came out, so many people, they just absolutely floored. They could not believe that they either didn't see it or that, most people are just floored because they don't believe that someone like him could have done it. And boy, what a condemnation that is for us to think that anyone would be immune to that. It's the only sin, immorality is the only sin in Scripture where we're not told to, develop a defense. We're told to run because, you're not strong enough.
You're not. You're just not.
Yeah.
No, and I think as a culture and as a society, we have a tendency to do that to other human beings, is put them on a pedestal and have a greater expectation on them. And sure, that's a big, huge responsibility. Huge.
Yeah, and it's not fair.
No,
to
it is
put them
not.
on that.
It is not. And then to shun somebody that has fallen that hard.
Yeah. There's a lot of people who've just tossed everything about him right out the door.
And it's easy for us to want to just cancel.
Yeah.
But I look at a lot of where I'm at now in my life, and I have studied a lot of Ravi's work up to this point.
Yeah. In a lot of ways, he was brilliant.
Very.
Yeah. And,
very.
I just wish he would have been able to live what he knew. Somehow that knowledge never actually wasn't able to maintain control over his body.
Right. And again, the whole crux of all of this is talking about mental illness, and that's a perfect example. And just the intricacy and the layers of his mental illness that he suffered.
Yeah.
Huge.
Yeah, because there had to be something underlying there.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
No real way out of it.
No. And I can't imagine anybody that wasn't suffering from some sort of mental illness and imbalance or whatever would be able to pull any of that off and not have remorse, empathy again.
Yeah.
With the victims, all the women, and as far as I know, they were all women.
Yep.
To have, some sort of empathy towards them. That's pretty scary.
Yeah. They were
it's
tools.
Yeah, and again, looking at some of the personality disorders that are out there. And as a culture, I think, and this is just my opinion, and my opinion doesn't hold much for anything, but I really think we're creating more of that narcissistic characteristics. Much more. The entitlement.
Yep.
The lack of empathy.
Yep. What are some? Now here's a good question for you. What are some things? So you got young people in the world today. You got young women. You got young men, and unfortunately, you never really know where someone is coming from for their appetites. But how would someone on the side of being groomed? What kind of language would you be looking for, and how would you spot those types of things?
Excessive compliments, where it's almost scripted or acted. It feels like you're like, ooh, I mean, that's good, but it's not. Like, oh my gosh, George, you're just the greatest. I have never met anybody that could speak as eloquently as you speak. It is just phenomenal.
Well, I can understand that. Yes. I've had some gooder education than most people.
The book learning.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
I think if you that's a red flag when the excessiveness starts to, the excessive complimenting. There's compliments. There's like, George, you're like you really do an awesome job when you speak.
Yep.
There's that. And then you can feel the believability in that and the genuineness in that, as opposed to me like
It's
flowering
slightly
it.
over the top.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Where again, it almost as if I was reading it off a script. It was acted. That should be a red flag. It really should be. When an individual may be normalizing nakedness. We're going into change to go swimming. And it's normal for you to see me naked. It's normal for me to see you naked. That kind of thing. No,
this is how we were born.
Yeah.
No, we weren't.
No. When that kind of stuff is actually occurring, and again, that may sound extreme, but that's part of the grooming process, making that look normal.
So normalizing things that should be, or making things public that should be private.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And even having conversations about things that, maybe we shouldn't be talking about. And them feeling that this is just a normal conversation. You shouldn't feel ashamed about that.
Yeah.
It's just normal that people like this, this is how we talk.
Yeah.
Some people talk. No, not necessarily. Not necessarily.
We've got to rise above our inhibitions.
Yeah.
No, those inhibitions are there for a reason, bub.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Trust. That's they'll do whatever it takes to gain your trust. Or they're going to buy you gifts. Going to, implore you with those things to make you feel, wow, that's great. This person gives me stuff.
Yeah.
I feel like I really need to be around that person. I need that person because they're giving me stuff. And oftentimes, somebody that's vulnerable, and most of the time, a predator's going to go after someone that's vulnerable.
Yeah.
They're easy prey.
Yeah.
So there's an awful lot of signs that I think if we start to feel uncomfortable, you better go with what your gut's telling you.
Yeah.
It's not lying.
That defense mechanism, this is there for a reason.
It is, and yet we, again, for whatever reason, we like to dismiss it. And maybe it's because, I don't want that person to not like me.
Yeah.
Afraid of being, not accepted.
Yep.
Yeah, I'll take the non-acceptance over somebody, trying to do something that...
Or they're an authority figure, and I need them to approve of me so that I can move on. And
Right. Right.
Do you really need them to approve of you, though?
Right.
Yeah. Wow.
It's secrets. Nobody needs to know about our relationship, our special relationship.
Just be between us.
Yes.
No.
Buying somebody's secret, to be able to keep them or maintain the secretness, buying that.
Yeah.
And that goes right along with, that person's buying stuff for me. And yikes.
Yep.
Red flag.
Kind of like when Rafi would give people multiple hundreds of dollars worth in tips for their services rendered.
Right.
And, that's not hush money. I just really appreciate you.
Right. Oh. Right.
So if I blow him in, he won't appreciate me again.
And normal human beings are going to, if we want that to continue, if we still want, because we're vulnerable, and again, most of the time when somebody like Ravi or any other predator, finds who they want, their prey, we're in a vulnerable place, and we will continue to, I need that person. Look, I need that money. I'm vulnerable right now because I don't have the means. They're going to give it to me. I'm going to allow this to happen.
Yeah.
Our bad.
Yeah. And sometimes it's even, you're talking about moral issues, it ends up being unintentional on the part of the person doing the grooming. They may be, like, affairs start this way.
Oh,
you get someone who is
right.
not getting the attention they think they should, or they don't feel like their partner is loving them like they should. And all of a sudden someone at work is very complimentary and very, this person listens and this is going on. They don't, and the person involved with it doesn't realize that they're in a grooming situation. And while they may be unintentionally grooming somebody else, that person is also grooming them for something. And you end up in this horrible situation. Neither of you can get out.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we can avoid a lot of those situations, not only by the signs that we were just talking about, but not putting, an expectation on another human being that they're never going to meet.
Yeah.
As far as my spouse, your spouse, they're just not meeting what I believe, they should be giving me. We're putting that person in expecting something that honestly only God can really fulfill.
Yeah.
And then we're so disappointed when the humans in our life
Yeah.
aren't fulfilling what we need them to fulfill.
And half the time we've never shared what our needs actually are
True
with
story.
that person.
True story. Because we actually think that they should be able to read our minds, or they should have this, crystal ball.
Yep. When I counsel couples, at some point in time, inevitably, the wife is going to say, "Well, he knows."
Does he?
And meanwhile, the husband's sitting there with this blank look on his face, and he's like, "See, that's exactly what he does when we argue." And I'm like,
he doesn't know.
Yeah, you want me to know what that means? No clue what you're talking about. And he's scared right now because he's thinking that I think that he should know, but what he needs to know is that I know he doesn't know.
Yeah, communication.
Oh, yeah. Well, anyone should be able to see that. No, that's not the case.
No, men and women are different.
Yep.
Men and women are so different, and we're different in our communication sometimes too.
Yep.
And if we don't understand that, then we are in for a world of hurt when it comes to our relationships.
Yep.
A world of hurt.
Yep. When I hear a wife say that, it's like he just doesn't understand how I feel. And I ask, have you ever explained to him how you feel? Well, should I have to explain that to him?
Yes. Yes.
Come on,
He's a man, you're a woman. There's a difference. Now, I know we live in a society today, our culture tells us it doesn't make a difference. But it does.
Yep.
It makes a huge difference. And if we don't communicate, and we don't tell somebody how we feel, our spouse how we feel, we can't expect, then again, that it's our bad.
Yep.
Suffer.
Yep. Women think men think emotionally, and we don't. And men think women think practically, and they don't.
No.
It's not. I mean, there are exceptions to both of those, but
there's aspects of emotion in men, because men do have emotions.
Yep.
I mean, they're not emotionless.
Yep. You just usually have them in a box in the corner.
No, that's a great place for them. That is a perfect place for them. And women can, think practically. We can, but that's not the norm.
Yep.
That is not usually how we maneuver through our relationships with our spouses. Nope. And we have to understand that's just the way it is. And don't fight it, because you're just going to be like, douche.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to be like one bruised person by the time you're done, till death do us part.
Yep.
You're really going to be bruised and battered and beaten.
Yep. Or one of you is going to shut off in the relationship.
Completely. Yeah.
When you get husbands who think they need to train their wives, or wives that think they need to train their husbands,
Absolutely.
really all they're doing is preparing for their next marriage. Because, that person that they've just mentally abused and, and just taken all of the will out of, eventually they're going to separate.
Oh, yeah.
And then they're going to find someone who won't do that to them. They'll be more aware of
and
the
if
next relationship.
If it isn't a physical separation, it sure as heck will be a mental separation.
Yeah.
And you find that in the church a lot. Way too much.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not a proponent of divorce. Please don't hear me say that. But what I am saying is that mentally people will pull apart. And when that occurs, then you are maybe possibly looking at divorce or one miserable household.
Yep.
Unfortunately.
Oh boy, does that happen.
Yes. And in the church we see these things with our friends and with our fellow believers. We see it, and yet we, for whatever reason, we're like, I can't get involved in that. That's their stuff. And it's
yeah. I care about them too much to help them with their life.
Yes.
Oh, good. Yeah. Now you care about them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think there's a balance there. I mean, we absolutely don't want to be diving in head first into somebody's relationship and making a mockery of it.
Yep.
But But there is a way that we can pay attention to those that we care about and those that we love in the church, and be able to reach out to them and ask them and be that safe person for them. I'm not talking safe space. I'm talking safe person that isn't going to go out and blab to everybody else. Yeah. Hey, did you hear what's going on with so and so?
Yeah. Oh, well, we call that sharing.
Oh, of course.
Yes, that's Christians bearing one another's burdens without their permission.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Yes. It still can be done in a way that is not going to the level of talking behind their backs. So and so's not even here to defend themselves. Come on. It's caring for another individual. It's seeing that they're struggling in something. Or, you know what? You may have just witnessed something that just didn't look right, or for that matter, didn't feel right. You feel, you can feel the coldness. It's detectable. Very detectable. Yep. You can, I think for the most part, most of us that are in tune with ourselves can actually be in tune with other people and just see some real simple, subtle cues that are going on. And you're like, whoa.
Yeah. It's supposed to be like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, and again, if it's just the normal relationship stuff that happens in all of our relationships, fine. But if it's something that we're watching that's been going on and on and on and on, I think we need to say something.
Time to speak up.
We do need to say something. Yeah. And again, I think the stigma of mental illness, the stigma of, somebody knows what's going on in my life, in my relationship, in my marriage. When outward appearances look different, we want to make sure we cover that all up. Mm-hmm. I think people are fearful that the true self or the true relationship is gonna come out.
Yep.
And then the fallout. People are gonna start looking at me differently. They're not gonna respect me like they used to respect me.
Yeah.
The church is going to shun me.
Yep.
All of
I'll never get past this.
Never. Oh, goodness, never. Never, never, never.
Yeah. Naturally, because you can't, because you're a dirtbag.
That's right. You should wallow in it.
Yep.
For eternity.
Yep.
Where were we?
Yes, where were we? So, when we're talking about mental health within the church, dealing with it, identifying it, helping out, there's only so much we can do as a church. There's only so many resources that we have, and so much capability and understanding that we have. So what do you think the church can do, the church in general, what do you think the church in general can do to be more of a resource for people who are in this situation? Obviously there's knowing about where things are located in your community and stuff. Right. But there's got to be more to it than just pointing someone to somebody else. Sure. Oh, you're one of them. Go over there. Right. Right. Here's your yellow star. Get in line. That kind of thing. Yeah. It's not a. To me, it just seems like there's got to be something that we can do to be more of a help in this area, especially something as important as this.
Sure, and I think absolutely know who your resources are in your community, and maybe to take it a step further is to maybe we need to have a better relationship with some of those resources in the community. So when we are ready to refer somebody, we've really kind of vetted them already. Yeah. And then we feel a little bit more comfortable when it comes time to referring somebody to that person, or that here's 5 people or 3 people. Yep. We know them already.
Yeah. I've made the mistake of recommending someone to go see a counselor that I didn't know well enough, and it was that situation was sending, this is going to sound wrong, but sending a couple in trouble to a counselor who's been divorced a couple times. That was just a mistake.
It didn't, yeah.
Their whole viewpoint on marriage was completely not right. But by the time I figured it out, it did make a difference. It was done.
I know. And I still think, too, even after we've vetted individuals and we've gotten to know who they really are, you still have to look at the aspect of sometimes some people just are not going to mix. They're just not. That's okay. That is perfectly fine. And it doesn't hurt my feelings when somebody says to me, it's just not going to work out. Now I want to know why. I do, because I want to be aware of my deficits. Did I do something? Did I say something? But I do think we have to also be super cognizant of that it's going to happen. Yep. This person could come back to you and go, George, oh my gosh, you said.
Yeah.
Well, yes. Now that does not necessarily mean that person's a bad therapist, counselor at all.
Right.
It could also be that individual, or like I said, they just don't mix. Personalities don't mix. You would hope that the belief system's the same, because when you're talking about in the church and trying to refer somebody out, you want that thought process to be the same.
Yeah. Hopefully they have a biblical mindset.
Absolutely. If they don't, well, then they don't. That's not what we're not referring to that person. But we're all still individuals, and we all still have a responsibility ourselves. I often hear, well, therapy's just not for me. Counseling's just not for me.
That's for people with real problems.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. What that says to me, it says a couple things, but mainly it points out to me that I'm really not ready to take a look at really what's going on with me. I'm not ready yet. Okay. I'm like, no problem.
Yeah.
No problem. Because we're just going to be spinning our wheels, and we might start off on the wrong foot if that is your attitude about therapy or counseling. So, okay. Call me if you need me.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I get couples who come in periodically, and it's usually the same thing. Husband wants the counseling because the wife is broken. Where in reality, the wife isn't broken.
It's him.
Yeah, but you need to fix her. Can you fix
her?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. No. Will you tell her something from the Bible that will make her listen to me?
Right.
No.
Well, and again, I think that I honestly do believe that question that we had talked about a while ago about when you go in to see a counselor, the first thing your counselor should ask you, maybe not the first thing, but it should be somewhere in there. What is your expectation of this, of me, of the, the whole process of counseling? In the same with marriage counseling, we have to do the same thing. What is your expectation here, people? What do you want out of this? And what do you think you're going to get from this? And if it's this unrealistic expectation, then we got to correct that right off the bat. And if we don't, it's going to rear its ugly head somewhere. It's going to come out.
Yep.
So it's better if we ask it right at the beginning.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So if you could give people just a simple piece of advice on how they're going to go through. So here are some things that you should just make sure you're doing to protect and guard and nurture your mental health. As like a last word, so to speak. Even for people who may just never ever want to go see a counselor, but they know they should. What would you tell that person as a kind of a closing remark?
I said it before. I'll say it again. We look at what you can control and what you can't control. And honestly, if you can be honest with yourself about that question and fully believe and go back to it frequently, because we're going to forget. And left to our own accord as human beings, we forget. We think that we are the puppet master.
Yeah.
But that would be my parting gift is really what can you control and what can't you control. And you can control your thoughts, and you can control your reactions. You can. And once that's done, I think you may find life will start to change a little bit.
Yeah, and you can control your sleep. You can control your diet. Sounds like the Serenity Prayer.
Doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. It is.
Yeah.
And honestly, if we really started to live our lives a little bit more in that realistic realm, I think we could probably be a little bit more content, and then the happiness would be there if we could just be content.
Find some peace with what you can control. Let the rest of it go, because it can't control it anyway. So why give it authority in your life?
Yep.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for spending some time with us, and I really do appreciate it. And hopefully we can all be a little less crazy in the future.
I hope so. And I appreciate it too. I thank you very much. And
Awesome.
yeah, I do hope we can be a little less crazy.